Welcome everyone to our live lesson with Isaac Castillo. He is the course instructor behind Laravel 5 course, the one that we have just recently released here on SitePoint Premium. So if you're not familiar with it, that's fine. You'll notice that you have access to this live lesson here, but also if you've registered and you're watching, which you would be, you have access to our chat rooms as well. And I will be sharing that link with you in case you're not familiar with the course. But yes, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So let's say hello to Isaac Castillo. And Isaac Castillo, if you could give us a little bit of an intro to yourself. I know that you are or were a full stack LAMP bootcamp instructor. Could you give us a little bit more information about yourself and what you're doing and what you'll be covering today?
Yeah, sure. Hello, guys. Welcome. My name's Isaac Castillo. I've been doing application or development for quite some time. More recently, for about 3 years, I worked at a boot camp. So it was an online coding boot camp where we taught PHP. It was a LAMP stack, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then we ended up teaching the Laravel MVC framework. So I worked there as a lead instructor for about 3 years, and then I went out and kind of published some YouTube videos, and YouTube videos had to do with Laravel development as well. Currently, I'm doing freelancing, so that's about 6 months in the making, and then love touching new technology. Here we are.
Hey, sorry, I had myself on mute while you were doing that. Great. So I hope you're all excited. We're going to jump into a bit of Laravel today. We've just released our course. It focuses on Laravel 5.2, but in this lesson, we're going to go into some of those lessons and then also look at the changes made in 5.3. So do you want to give us a little bit more information about that, Isaac?
Sure, yes. So today we'll be covering some lessons that are in the curriculum. Some of them being routing. We're going to discuss routing, middleware a little bit, and then we'll probably be discussing requests and views, and then the changes that are, blade templating, that's important as well. And then some of the changes that are coming up in or that are already released in 5.3, and kind of how you can kind of get this switched over to 5.3. And there's not too many differences, but I'll be pointing some of those differences out.
And as you're joining us and you're watching Isaac work through the live lesson, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat room at any point, and I will field those questions across to Isaac so that we can bring you answers during the live event. So without further ado, I'll let you get started, Isaac.
So let me share my screen here. So first, let's talk about if you haven't installed Laravel yet, I'm going to real quick run through that. And there's a couple commands you can do for that. And then this is explained in the lessons as well. But you can download the Laravel installer. Doing so we'll put it on your computer. It takes some work to kind of get it working, which I do explain, but an easier way to do it for those of you who do hopefully have Composer will be to run this command right here at the terminal. Now, Composer is just a pre-package or a package system for PHP, if those of you are kind of new to that. So my home directory, or I go to my projects directory. I'm just going to show you the command. You would run this, and then this would be whatever the name of the folder you want to create. So, folder name here. When you run it, it's going to run it. It's going to pull from the web, and it's going to download. While it's downloading, I'm going to talk to you about some of this other stuff that we got going on in Laravel. So I'm going to go to, I already actually have it installed. I'm going to stop this right here. Once it's installed, you want to go into that directory. It's going to take some time here for the internet to catch up. And then you're just going to run a Composer install. And then after that runs, you will run an npm install in those folders. And the reason I'm not running those is because I already actually have it set up here Okay, and then we'll go to 5.2. So I've already ran a composer install, and then I've already ran a npm install in here, and hit enter, and that takes some time to kind of update, especially the node package. So kind of what's come through with the Laravel 5 is that there's a lot more JavaScript integration with it, with Node and some of the stuff with something like Vue and things like that. But we can that actually gets a little bit more integrated whenever we're in 5.3, and I'll show you how. So let's talk about routing. Real quick, kind of like an entry point here, I want just to kind of tell you that a lot of the testing we're going to be doing right now is going to be here in this routes file. And the reason being is because this is kind of like the easiest point for our application. Normally you have, so Laravel being an MVC framework, normally you have your model, your view controller, and everything's kind of separated. But for easy kind of point of entry, we're going to be doing this at the route level. So that way in the routes, we could kind of show you how this stuff works. But normally you're going to have everything kind of in their own compartments, like in controllers and then your models and stuff like that. So here at routes, let's talk about routes. Routes kind of give us what we, kind of the entry point for our web. So here we have this live lesson 5.2. And this lesson right here is mapped to that, to the folder that I have open right here. But the moment I want to start creating URLs here, like let's say I'm going to do some sort of test URL, and I want this URL to kind of show me some content. The moment I hit enter, of course, it's going to give me an error here because I got to actually go create that route. So what we want to do here, we're going to call route, and route is a functionality that we get inside of Laravel, and this right here is called a facade. I mean, it's just a fancy name with saying that, hey, I want an easy way to access this functionality that's here in route inside the route class, and they call them facades in Laravel. And if you're familiar with HTTP verbs, one of them being get. Now, if you're not familiar with HTTP verbs, just think of a verb, it's something that something. And HTTP meaning when I hit a URL, something like this, that's a get. That means I enter this URL and I'm trying to get information. And that's really probably the most used HTTP verb that you get. The other one that you might notice or remember is every time you fill out a form, you're sending a post. And then there's other verbs, and MVC frameworks make use of these verbs so that way they can either update, they can create, or get retrieve information from the system. So here I'm saying I want something to match test, and test being this this word right here, and I want it to do something. So route takes two parameters, and you're going to have one being the URL that you want to match, the second one being the actual function. And normally it's not a function. Normally in an application you're going to have this point to a controller. But for now, like I said, we're going to do everything in the routes just because that's an easier access point for us to test stuff. So just real quick, just because you guys missed that, I'm going to just do one route. Again, you can see the routes that I created here. Route, get, then return. And right now, all I'm doing is returning a string to kind of reiterate that. I'm saying, hey, I just want you to return the string when I hit that in the URL. So when I go here in the URL instead of live lesson, that was for you, guys and gals. Sorry, and then you can see, sorry about that. And that's just showing you the get request. Now with HTTP verbs, of course, we have get, post. put delete that would go right here, and of course it would just be like that, or put, and then each one would get handled kind of separately or differently. Let me change that back. So the other thing we're going to talk about is kind of like middleware. And in middleware, I kind of like middleware quite a bit, because you think of middleware as, well, first you think of programming as there's always an entry point and there's an exit point. You got your inputs and outputs, and going back to the days when programming first started, that's all it really is. And that's all it really is now. You got ways to kind of input information into the system, with your peripherals like your keyboard and your mouse and things like that. And then you got outputs, which would be the screen. Well, the same thing with applications. You got inputs into the application. I hit a URL with a GET request. And because I hit it with that GET request, it's going to output some sort of information. And here with programming, we get to kind of control upon what input do we get what output. And in this case with middleware is a nice thing that's been around for years, but it's integrated with Laravel to where I can control any input coming in before I actually do any output. And upon that criteria being met, I can route the user anywhere depending if the criteria is met or not. So without further ado, let's create our first route, or first middleware here. So the command line, one thing I want to show you kind of real quick, if you're inside a Laravel install, and here, you see the Laravel kind of packages and stuff. Let me make sure to kind of bring this up here. You can run PHP Artisan. Now, Artisan is really just a PHP file. And that's all it is. You think it would be some other command here, but really, if you look at the top, right here, it's just a PHP file that I'm telling it to run on the command line. So if I run PHP Artisan and I just hit return, I like doing this because sometimes I forget the commands, and this is an easy way to kind of bring up all the commands that are available for you for your Laravel application. So here you see available commands, and right here you'll see, oh, I can make middleware here. Create a middleware class. Now, there's nothing wrong with actually going to the directory. Here, if you would be inside an app. Here, it would be an HTTP. And sorry, I can't make the folders bigger, but here it'll be in middleware. I can actually go in here and right-click and create a PHP file and make sure that I have everything in there. But this command just kind of generates it and gives us a nice template to work with. So the command is PHP Artisan middleware age check middleware, and you can really call this anything you want. Notice that I did it's called Pascal casing, first capital letter, second capital letter, third capital letter in the name, and that's just a common practice. So I'm going to hit return, and it says that it created that successfully. So I go over here and notice right here I have age check middleware. If I double click on there, and you can see, it put in this code for us. Now like I said before, I can right click, create the file, and plop this code in there, and then I'd be fine and get going. But, I like it to generate it for me so that way that I don't have any typos or anything like that in mind. So what I'm going to do is, or first let's kind of quickly explain what's going on here. Age check middleware. So here this says public function handle and then the request. So this request has to do with the request that's coming in through the application. It could be a request that's a GET request. Remember, we're talking about those HTTP verbs again. So it could be a GET request, it could be a POST request, a PUT, a delete, or any of those kind of requests that I can listen for, or I can actually pull, and then upon that request, figure out if I want to put some sort of criteria here. So what happens is, think of this is kind of put in the middle between the actual request and the application itself. So this is the entry point then. This handles the request. And right here, this is why I like to say it. You can interrupt here, because right here, this return right here says, my mouse is going everywhere. Continue on with the request. So I'm going to put a little comment. Continue on with request, and then just to kind of like shout this idea here is this line right here says, I want you to continue on with the request. If I leave it like this, nothing will happen, you know? But here, this is when I choose to interrupt the application. So I can put any code here and then stop the application right here. So that way, you know, I don't want it to go on to the next request if none of these conditions pass. So real quick, I can grab this request variable that's coming in, and Laravel takes care of this part right here. So I can grab this input, and I'm just going to say input age. Now that's not created yet. I'll show you one quick tool right here. If we did DD, DD means dump and die. So here I use this, I use DD quite a bit, all over my application, meaning when I hit this request, I want you to just show me this information. Let's take this real quick to route, and let's create this route real quick so that way we can, we'll do it on, we'll make a new one. That way we can see what's going on here. Age, and then we're gonna just say function return. Well, actually, I'm just not gonna return. I'm just gonna do DD here. I'm saying when I go to age, I want you to get the excellency age check. Let's call this age check. When I go to age check, I want you to just dump the request for age. So age check. It looks like something went wrong. It says undefined variable request. Yeah, give me 1 second here. Oh, that's not going to work. I apologize, guys. We'll just leave it in here. I thought I can access it through here, and there's some other stuff I got to do. Sorry about that. So, class that's coming in, and I'm going to show you that. We're going to go another route with that. And what I'm going to say is that if this incoming request for age is less than, let's just say, like 18. Pretend this is some sort of movie app or something, and they can't get in unless there's 18, 17, or 18. Just say 17. If that request is less than 18, then I want you to redirect. I want you to return redirect, sorry. Return redirect to the home URL. We could do that or something like that. So the request coming in, handle the request. If the request age is less than 17, I want you to go back to the home page. This right here, this return being kind of like the else. You know, you could put an else and that could work, but if this condition doesn't meet right here, it'll just kind of ignore this condition and go on to the next line here. So it's kind of a quicker way to do that. So I'm saying coming in through age, if it's less than 17, then redirect to home, or just continue on with the request and allow the person to go. Now that I got my age middleware kind of hooked up or set up, I got to kind of connect it with the app so that way I'm able to use it. And the way you do that is under app, HTTP, and then kernel.php is what they call it. So here you see this route middleware. When Laravel says they kind of out of the box have authentication so that we could do user login, user password stuff, this right here is the middleware that's associated with that. And we can create our own. We're going to say I want you to do an age check app, and then HTTP middleware age check where that should be. I'm just going to go over here and make sure. Copy that. Yep, I had a typo. Actually, I had a typo when I created it, but that's fine. It'll still work. So here, route get age check. I can introduce this middleware now here. I couldn't before, but now that I have it kind of hooked up with my app, I'm going to say middleware age check and then the function here. And I'm going to say return. I'm going to say UR2 here. Actually, age check. Okay, so we got middleware right here. And let's kind of go through this one more time. Middleware comes in through here. We check the age. We redirect to the home page if the age is not met, or we allow the request to happen. We went into the kernel and we said, I have this age check. So this, think of this right here as a label. You come up with this. It could be whatever, something. I called mine age check. And then I said age check, and I want you to use the middleware class that's in that we created. Now, because I set this up in routes, I say when I hit this URL, I want to attach this middleware to that and then allow it to continue on with the application. So now when I go age check, make sure routes line 28. I forgot a bracket. Container, middleware does not exist. Give me a second. This is why you have to enjoy live coding.
Well, I'll just interrupt here. Now, we did have a question come in, and I did also run through a poll with the team down here. Well, not the team, sorry, the crew in the chat room. So Vadim has a question for you. He wants to know, is there any way to have any caching on the routing level?
Caching on the routing level.
Mm-hmm.
Caching as far as in, you're just talking about regular caching?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I want to say that caching, now I haven't done much caching here with Laravel, but I want to say on the newest install of Laravel, there's been a ton of caching updates. At the routing level, you could create any sort of caching here. Like let's say this is your route right here. For 5.3, it would be something like that, and then you would have to make sure that you use whatever library here is for routing. So you could you can create a full application just using routes alone. Now that doesn't follow the MVC framework per se. So what I would probably end up doing if you're going to do caching is that here in this route, you would create a controller, and that points to the controller, and then you handle the caching there in the controller. That would be more suited for the kind of the MVC framework pattern of stuff. But you can actually create a full app just all in routes, but it'd be a really long, messy file. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Vadim, let us know if that's answering your question. Now, I did also ask all the registrants how familiar they were to Laravel 5. Were they just starting? Were they very familiar? Or are they transitioning from an older version of Laravel over to 5.3? 80% are just starting. One of them, in fact, Wilton, is actually mentioning that he's going to get started on a project this very afternoon. And so, Wilton, if you get started and you complete it, share that link with us. Tweet Isaac, tweet me if you'd like, tweet SitePoint, and we'll have a look at what you've done. So we'd be very happy to look at that. So 80% are just starting and 20% are transitioning over to 5.3. Do you have any advice for those who are just starting to use Laravel 5?
Yeah, so Laravel 5 has come quite a way. There's quite a bit of, if you're just starting and you have not started an application yet. Now, I know from 5.2 to 5.3, I mean, there's not much changes. So there's nothing wrong with doing the 5.2 course with a 5.3 install. There's some folders that might be a little different, and you may not see any, some of the folders that are missing, but everything will work just right. So I would say, starting out, watch the SitePoint video for kind of getting started with that. And then the other thing that I would say is the Laravel documentation. Now, the reason why I love Laravel so much is because, one, I've worked with libraries where the documentation is just not where it needs to be. Now, Laravel documentation is pretty on point, and it really does run you through some stuff. And some of the other things, when you kind of get a little bit further into kind of Laravel development, you have, of course, here the Laravel documentation. This API documentation will kind of release a ton of other things that are available to Laravel. So not everything's documented, but for the most part, to get an application up and running, it's pretty well documented. So I would say be sure to kind of read over that and make sure you kind of understand that as well. And, don't give up. I tend to consume information as much as I can. I think I call it a sickness. But, if I'm not doing something, if I'm not reading it, then I'm watching YouTube videos on it, or I'm doing something else with it. And I would just say, kind of be really interested in kind of just deep dive, dive deep into it and just kind of consume yourself with it. It does make PHP nice to work with, and it's very, as far as what you can build with it. I've worked on some testing applications, testing for apps, and man, it's really come a long way from when I remember starting out with PHP, when you would just open a PHP file and drag and drop it on the server somewhere.
Jeff wants to know, do you think it's worth the effort to migrate existing applications from Laravel 4 to 5?
Oh, okay, so 4 to 5. That's a huge. I would say if the application is working and it's doing what it needs to, then I probably would not upgrade, or I would say, hey, it's time to upgrade, and then you would have some sort of new install of Laravel and start bringing things over. I mean, it would be a very active project. If there's items that just can't be solvable that 5.3 has already solved, I would say it's worth a look. So I have a kind of a list of 5.3 stuff here. There's things like that are help with like text searching inside of the database stuff. There's stuff like Mailable, which Mailable is just an easier way to mail. Now, if your mailing already works in 4.2 or 4.3, then I would just continue to use that. It is nice to take advantage of some of the newer features, so it really depends what you're doing with it and what you're trying to upgrade for. But 4.2 and 4.3 are still solid applications. It's just everything's different when it comes to that.
So what are some of the significant differences between 5.2 and 5.3?
Significant, I would say, here, let's look at this real quick. I finally got this thing to work, sorry. So one thing, let's talk about like this. If you're going to take the course, or when you take the course, not if you're going to take the course, you're going to take the course, go take the course. When you take the course, there's only one, for this course, there's only one difference that you'll notice, and it's where they move the routes. So when you do a new install and you take the course and you're on 5.3, nothing in the coursework that I've done will actually matter from 5.2 to 5.3, other than where do I find the routes folder, and there's some folders missing. So here in this application here, you go to app, HTTP, and then routes.php. So here's where we handle all the routes and everything that kind of gives us an access point to our application. If you go to Laravel 5.3, and you go to app, HTTP, there's no routes in here. What they ended up doing was, because you access it so much, when they created this, or they changed this, they said, why don't we just create a routes folder? There's no reason for you to be going down 3 levels deep into an application like this to find that routes folder. And then the other thing they did is they broke out the web routes into a web.php. And the reason they did this is because maybe you have an API that you're going to be building, and it's going to be using these routes. For the most part, this is the one that I interact with is inside of routes, web. The additional change you'll see is that you'll have console, events, exceptions, jobs, listeners, policies, providers. A lot of those. Well, you still have providers here, but in the app, you're missing a ton of those. And so that might confuse you at first. But what they did was, a lot of these console, this has to do with commands. Well, I may not need commands for this application, or events. I may not need events for this application. As you can see, it's empty. I mean, there's just an empty class there. So what they ended up doing is these folders don't get generated unless you run a artisan command that will generate those files. So those are really the only 2 differences you notice if taking, when you take this course, is the routes folders in a different directory, and there's some missing directories, but don't worry, they'll get created as soon as you need them. Any other questions? I like these questions.
Keep your questions coming in. Rick wanted to know if it's worth porting Laravel 4 to Laravel 5. Now, is that similar to what was it?
Yeah, that is similar to the other one. Again, I'd say it depends. If you have a working app and it works for you, I think that's great. I always like upgrading because you get the newest tools, bells and whistles. If it's one of those things where it's a deal breaker, if it's like, hey, we have to upgrade because Laravel 5.3, we want to make use of the mailable class. You think of it more like, you're upgrading more for the niceness of the implementations of some of these things like the mailable, or maybe you want to make use of the API authentication or the search feature that's now in 5.3. Going from 4 just to 5.2, I mean, that's an upgrade enough. But then upgrading even more, you get access to some of these extra bells and whistles. So I would say it all depends on the need of the application. If the application is working, what I would do is probably do it as kind of a new upgrade or a separate install, and then kind of port over some of the features from the older application. That's probably the easiest route to go because there's so many file changes that happen between 4 and 5.
Excellent. And that's all the questions that we have for you at the moment. So I'm going to put myself on mute and let you continue on.
Okay, sounds good. So I got this working. I think I had some sort of spell error somewhere, but I got it working while we were while I was entering questions. So again, we have the middleware. We're checking for age. I'm gonna drop this down to 17. I tied it in the kernel.php file. And inside the routes, I'm saying I want to attach middleware to this age check right here. And use age check that's inside the kernel. That's that same label. Return this. So everything should pass, and I should see this. So here, if I do age check, what I'm actually looking for is a parameter called age. If you ask me, well, where is that coming from? Well, if you see here in the age check middleware, I'm saying if the input is age, and then I say if age is equal to, let's say, 18. And here, remember that I call middleware kind of interruptions. I'm saying that if it's less than 17 application, I want you to redirect it back to the home. If this fails, then just continue on with the request, which means I should see the page. So in this case right here, I'm saying age check, age is equal to 18. I hit return. You are now young again. If I say I'm 15, redirect me to the home page. So that's how middleware works. It doesn't even load the page. It checks for that stuff before. saying that, you know, in this case, age check again. When I pass a parameter, age is equal to 25. Well, if he's 25, yeah, go ahead and let him in. Have these either at the parameter level under a get, or maybe you're trying to check if the in the case of your auth, you know, is the person a guest? And so here it's HTTP middleware authenticate class. Let's go ahead and open up that one. Middleware authenticate. So here, this is just Laravel's way of saying, are they a guest? Meaning I'm not logged in at all. Direct them to the login. If they're trying to hit this URL with JSON, unauthorized kind of deal. So this right here, you think of this being, this is the interrupt. I'm not a guest, that means I'm logged in. Refine this request here. We're going to go to HTTP. And we're here in so I was trying to dump and die something here in the routes. I have copy paste here from some of my notes in case you're wondering. I don't type that fast. So I mean, I type fast. Just I'm a moderate typer. Here, so let's say we're going to hit requests in the web. Saying function request, and this is a little new here, and I'm going to explain this. And then I want you to grab all the requests, and I just want you to dump and die, and there's that dump and die again. For me to be able to use this, I'm going to have to add something at the top of the URL, or the top of the PHP file, and just say, hey, I want to be able to use this library inside of request. So think of that, it's kind of like an include, but you're including a whole library so that way you can use. And then function here, you're just saying, hey, I want to type hint this variable coming into the function so that way it'll handle or retrieve all the requests that's coming in. And requests, you think of a get string. So here, if you go to PHP, you know, this would be your query string. I said request is the URL, so request 25. See how it spits this out? And name is, and we are equals testing. And you can see that this array gets bigger, and I'm able to retrieve all the requests that are coming in from this URL. And this being the query string right here, I'm able to kind of output all that information there. Let me see, that one was kind of a short one, but it's just kind of showing you the same happen if I have a form and I'm posting to this URL. I can actually take all that form input using the same request. I don't have to change this at all. It's going to be a form, and you post to it, and then you can actually grab all the requests. Remember, normally in your control, normally already included in all the controllers when you generate them. All right. So next thing I wanted to kind of touch on is views. So we have route, get, and then we're going to call this, let's call this layout or something like that. Function. We're going to return a view. And view is just a function that's built into Laravel. So we're going to say return view. And I'm going to call the view test. And I'm just going to leave it at that right there. So normally, again, the way you tie in all the MVC together is that you're going to have this route to a controller instead of this function, and then that controller is going to either return a view or do some stuff and then return a view. So that way we do the views is used to, and those who asked the question about Laravel 4, they moved. So one of the things you got to notice from Laravel 4 to 5 is that views are no longer in the app directory. So inside the app directory, you used to have a folder called just controllers and then a folder called models. Even the models don't get their own directory. Don't ask me why. And I think I kind of forced or I would create a models directory and I would force all my models in there because it felt right to me. But then, you know, there was more incompatibilities kind of fixing that up, so I just kind of gave up and gave in and said, okay, fine, you want to keep it in the root, let's keep it in the root, and I'm not going to worry about it because everything works great. With the views here under resources, and then views, and if you're familiar with other application frameworks like Rails or something else, this is pretty much, this resource in this area is pretty much kind of like an asset pipeline, meaning it'll compile CSS, it'll compile JavaScript, and then kind of put them in certain folders that we would need them in. So right now, if I go to layout, it says test not found. Well, because we haven't created it yet. So here, it's looking for a test view. Well, it's going to be under resources and view, and I'm going to right click and just hit new file, and I'm going to call it test because that's what I called it in my route here, test.php. Okay, so then we are at view. We are at view. And again, we still don't get that HTML that we have in here, but we're going to get to that when we get to blade templating. Any questions thus far? Oh, whoa, before the questions here, forgot to show you one thing. Here we're in the view, but let's say I want to pass information on to the view. Let's say I have, we're doing some logic here, and we finally got, we pulled the title of some blog, and this is some blog title like this. And we have the content, and then we pulled some information for the content. So I want to be able to access this inside of this view file. One of the things that we got to do a little differently is we got to change this test.php file. So we're going to be getting to this kind of the next little section here. But we got to change it to blade, and because we're going to take advantage of some blade syntax here. So here, for now, we'll just say this is test.blade.php. Still a PHP file. You can do PHP in here, and let's go ahead and do PHP, and then we'll change it. So we're saying I want to echo test that variable. Here I want to echo. Actually, it wasn't test. I said title and content. Content. But here's the title. We go over here to Laravel. We're going to get an error. It's an error. It's saying I don't know what this is. So here in this view, I have variables that I want to access from, let's say here, the routes file. Well, the way we do that is here in routes, we're saying I want to return this view. You can pass several things here as a second parameter. You can pass an array. Array is title, and I want it to have the value of whatever title is. It's content, and I want you to have access to whatever the content here is. So here we have an array we're creating. View, I want to access that variable, and that variable in the view is going to be called. What does that view hold? I mean, what does that title hold? What holds the value of what's inside of here is title. Same thing with content. So now I save that, and when I refresh, I should have it. And there we go. There's the blog title. If we wanted to kind of fix it up a little bit, H1 or something like that. And yeah, you could do HTML inside of here. And then there's your blog title and your content. And here I have some variables I need inside the view. Goes over through an array to that view. So we'll talk about blade syntax a little bit. Here we have this view. Blade syntax just makes it nicer. It just makes everything look a little easier on the eyes when it comes to our HTML. So that way our HTML looks just like HTML. And then PHP, you don't really see much PHP tags. You can use them in there, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a lot cleaner when you don't. So here, for instance, I want to echo title. Well, I just do it 2 curly braces, title. And you'll see this a lot in templating engines. If I do that, 2 curly braces, and then I do layout, and nothing changed. So this is just kind of an easier way. It means the same thing as what I had there before, is PHP tags and then echo. So this looks a lot nicer to look at when you're looking at your HTML, and it looks like you're just looking at HTML. So one of the things that I like doing whenever I do Blade templating is I create a folder called layouts. And then inside of there, create a new file, and I'm just going to call this master.blade.php. And I had this template. It's just Bootstrap. I just copied and pasted it from Bootstrap. So there's nothing special going on there. Here, I'm going to do something cool here, and I'm going to say here, instead of starter template here, masterblade.php, I'm going to say yield content. So what I'm saying here is that here is a placeholder, and the label for that placeholder is content. So how do I use that inside of this view? Well, Blade syntax, a lot of the Blade syntax starts with the @ symbol here. So we can say @extends or @expend. And then the other thing is, what folder are we in? Well, we're inside the layout folder. Laravel is that we don't really have to say, oh, you're inside of app or you're inside of resources /views. If you just say everything that you do in Blade syntax is already in reference to the views folder. Layouts. And you could do this and just say master, but then there's another part that you could do here instead of that / and you could just do a dot. Either or work. But here, see if I get an error or not. Maybe because it's extends. There we go. So here it extends, not extend. @extends layouts dot master. So I'm saying I want you to extend that that file, and then we can actually put something here inside of the placeholder. I'm going to add some padding to the top. While I'm doing that, if you have any questions, let me know.
There are a few questions that have come in, so I'll just get around to them right now. Actually, one. Wilton wants to know, would you advise using Laravel for any projects, or would you rather not use Laravel?
So it depends on the project here, and I know I say it depends on the project a lot. I'm a real big supporter of, instead of using the tool to find the need, you know the need, and then you find the tool for that. You find the need for, let me backtrack. You find the tool for that need. So a lot of times it's like, oh, I need an about page and I need a contact us, and it's one page. So you're gonna have the contact on the same page. And to me, I'm like, oh, that's a little overkill for. I mean, that's a little underkill for Laravel. So you can either do regular HTML file, or you can do something like WordPress if they need to update the backend. The moment when you start saying, hey, I want it to work this way, where I have, like, for instance, my site, I have a feed coming in through YouTube. And then on that feed, I also have a feed that I was looking for that XML feed coming in from another blog. And then let's say some way I wanted a payment system or some sort of subscription or anything like that where it gets a little bit more custom. Yes, Laravel is the answer for that. Now, it's not the only for that, but it is a very good, very strong candidate for that. Laravel runs a ton of either full applications and even smaller applications. So the need being, I need some sort of need that's outside of WordPress, then yes. I need an about page, or let's say a business card website is kind of what I call them. It's an about, services, locations, contact. Then I would say, this is probably a job more suited for WordPress or some other package out there. So yeah, I would say it just depends on the need.
Excellent. All right, so it is we've currently got 4 minutes left to go in this live lesson. Isaac, how much longer would you need to complete the current exam?
Let me just show this one quick example, and then we could kind of get a little bit on 5.3 or answer questions, however you guys want to do it. So really here, this yield content, what you would do is you would say something like at section, and then the name of the label, and then you say at end section. And so what that does is it takes this and it places it right here at this placeholder. So if you view source right now, notice that that HTML is above all of ours, so it really didn't handle it correctly. If I refresh, everything will look the same, but notice how it kind of came into line with the rest of the layout. So if I refresh here, notice it's gone, and it's right here where it needs to be. So this is just real quick kind of example of blade syntax, but you can actually do for eaches and if statements, and they all start like this, and then at end if, and things like that. That's it for the blade syntax, and unless I can filter some more questions or real quick, I'll kind of just show you this. Interrupt me, Angela. Upgrading. So there is documentation on how to upgrade from 5.2 to 5.3. I went through this documentation yesterday, upgrading one of my apps. It is very labor intensive. So one of the things that I do, and I guess I take kind of the shortcut, is I tend to do a new Laravel 5.3 install, and then I carry over my controllers, my routes, and make sure all that works in the new install. I know it's a bit of a cheat, but then I don't have to worry about files missing and things like that. Questions? No questions streaming in yet. So I think now we should be wrapping up soon. So if you have any questions, get them in now. We've got about a minute before we wrap up. But in the meantime, how did you go, Isaac? Did you enjoy this live lesson? Yeah. This was fun. So a bit of a hiccup on the live coding, but that's always kind of expected whenever you're live coding. Nothing ever works the same. I mean, it works when you practice it. It just never works when you're actually doing it live. But I think that's just karma or some sort of thing like that.
Excellent. So could you give us a little bit of information about your course? I mean, we have run a poll and I've asked people how have they learned how to use Laravel, and 50% said courses, 50% said Laravel guides. What would you recommend? I know that you've got a course out. Could you give us a little bit more information about the current course that you've developed?
So the current course that I developed, I'm pulling it up here. It's a very kind of entry point into Laravel, and kind of getting, it talks a little bit more about, kind of getting a CRUD-based system. Now, CRUD, if those of you don't know, is create, read, update, delete. So first, talk about Laravel, the setting up of Laravel. This one's important and kind of strong because, it's setting up the environment so that we can easily use it. But in the end, you will have a working blog that's kind of tied to a MySQL database that you can actually update and create new blog posts with. So that's kind of fun. And then we are in talks about kind of adding some more to this, where we get some extra added benefit out of Laravel, because there's a ton to it. But this is a introduction course that gets you kind of off the ground running with a simple CRUD system of a blog.
Excellent. And I think that's about 3 hours worth of videos there in that lesson. So if you're interested and you're learning how to if you're learning how to use Laravel, then you can jump into that straight away. And transitioning that from 5.2 to 3 isn't too difficult. Would you have any recommendations for those who wanted to use your course, create samples, and then make the switch over to 5.3?
Yeah, so what I would say is go over this course. Remember that 5.3 is going to be a little bit different. And the only difference that I would say is when you see me talking about, well, let's go to our routes folder, you're not going to go under app HTTP and find a routes.php file. You're just going to go straight to routes and go to web. And so that's a lot easier than kind of going down to three levels for that. So remember that when you're going through the course. If you do the Laravel installer, when you do Laravel new and then talk about the new install, remember that it's going to install 5.3 right away because that's the most up to date. So just remember where the routes file is. And the other thing is you may be missing some folders, but don't freak out because they actually get generated whenever you need them. So we don't actually need them for this application.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for asking all these questions about Laravel. If you wanted to find out a little bit more information about Laravel, you can jump over to sitepoint.com /premium, and or even if you go to SitePoint.com, you can head over to our PHP channel full of articles, courses, and books. So you've got heaps of information to go by. And part of that information is Isaac's latest course, which is Laravel 5, now available on Premium. So that's 3 hours worth of videos where he goes through a lot more than what we covered in today's live lesson. But Isaac, do you have any final words?
Yeah, let me know what you think of the course. Let me know any additions that we can add to it. We're already talking about the additions that we can add that'll extend this a little bit better. And reach out to me anytime. Right here you'll find my Twitter account and then my, I guess, profile page here on Laravel. So be sure to follow me and, you know, and reach out to me. And then we're going to be extending this and making it better for you guys.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions for a follow-up course, what you would like to see in the next stage of this Laravel 5 course, let us know. Ping me, or tweet me, sorry, on Twitter, or tweet Isaac. My Twitter handle is __Angela Molina. Isaac, you are?
Iceman Cass.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
it.
So Twitter, and you can actually find me anywhere on the web as Iceman Cass. You do a Google search, might get scary, but yep, there I am.
There you are. Excellent. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us once again. And now I will actually start ending this this webinar. See ya.
Bye.